Well, thanks for joining us. I'm Lance Fieser. The next two-year state budget is now in front of Governor Tony Evers. The Democrat is considering whether to use his partial veto power on the Republican written plan or to veto the entire thing. One of the headlines in this budget is a $3.5 billion tax cut. When the Senate passed the budget Wednesday night, GOP leaders hailed Republican efforts to cut taxes in this budget and passed ones. Democratic leaders criticized the cut as one that primarily benefits the wealthy.
The tax plan we are voting on today would make the cumulative tax cut since 2011 $34.5 billion.
You're inflicting generational harm on our state by prioritizing these tax breaks for wealthy over investments in the ordinary people of the state of Wisconsin.
The passage in the Senate sent the bill to the Assembly, which approved it Thursday night. Republicans said it's the right size for the state, and Democrats called it a missed opportunity.
Being fiscally prudent and managing money more effectively is an important job for us to do. And certainly conducting ourselves in a more professional, positive manner is going to yield better results as we go forward.
This is a squandered opportunity to do what's right for the people of our great state, but I have good faith that in the near future we can do a lot better.
Governor Evers could veto the entire budget or pieces of it, and he hinted that he plans to use his partial veto power.
Every time they take a whack at it, they make some changes. So I just want to make sure that the pieces are in place for me to sign it or to veto it. So we're in the process of it. If we do sign it, there will be as many partial vetoes as we can muster.
Joining us on the show right now is Representative Mark Bourne. First off, thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you're one of the co-chairs of the Joint Finance Committee, so you've been through this process from the beginning. How would you describe, maybe in totality, if you were to kind of brief as to what the tone of this budget process was?
I think it was very similar actually to the last budget. I think we worked through the governor's proposals. We gathered a lot of information from all across Wisconsin. And then we crafted a budget that invested in the priorities of the people of Wisconsin. And so I think it was, a very deliberative process, and we focused on the things that we knew that were important in our communities as representatives of those communities throughout Wisconsin. And I don't think it was anything that was necessarily terribly adversarial. There's obviously times of disagreement, there's debate, there's discussions, but I don't think it was a negative process at all. I think it was a very positive process where we had a historic surplus so we could make both historic investments and a historic tax cut to return some of that money to the taxpayers. So overall, I think a very positive experience. A lot of work, certainly, for the committee to work through, a giant, hundreds of pages of the document itself. But overall, a very positive process and a product that I'm very proud of and I think is, good for the state of Wisconsin.
You mentioned there were a few things that were maybe a little bit more adversarial than others. One of them was the cuts to the UW system for funding. It was $32 million. You tied that directly to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Yep. Now, the governor had said if you made cuts along those lines for DEI, he threatened to potentially veto the whole budget. So why kind of go ahead with that? Was there a risk involved?
Well, I think it's important. That's why we went ahead with it. It's important that the University of Wisconsin focus on the workforce, on the future of the state. We need them to do that. We don't need them to focus on divisive issues. The people of Wisconsin want to focus on what's important to Wisconsin, our Wisconsin values, the jobs that we need to grow and improve this state for the future. And so it's an important discussion to have, and one that I'm glad that we're having. And I think there's more work to be done on it, but I think this is a good first start to make it clear that the taxpayers, when they fund higher education in this state, want to make sure that it's representing the things that we need it to represent, which is really the future of our workforce. It needs to be focused on how we grow and improve this state.
Tax cuts were something that I think everyone wanted tax cuts. It's just a matter of how do you do it. Mm-hmm. The tax cut proposal in here does cut taxes for all income tax brackets, but it does cut the highest percentage is at that highest income tax bracket. Obviously, the Democrats have called it a tax cut for the rich and wealthy. Do you disagree?
Yeah, I definitely disagree for several reasons. One, there is a big focus on the middle class in this, with that second and third bracket collapsing together. So that's one important thing to point out. Another thing is, if you're talking about across the board tax reform and reducing by percentages, obviously if you pay only a few $100s and you get a 10% cut, to make the math simple, that's going to be this much. If you're paying tens of thousands of dollars in taxes and you get a 10% cut, that's going to be more money. You're paying a lot more taxes. The other thing, though, that's important to talk about, and I think it's glossed over too much, is this is a tax policy decision to try to be competitive, especially here in the Midwest. We want families to move to Wisconsin. It's a great place to live, work, and raise a family. But our tax climate right now is not great. When you compare us to other Midwestern states, the top bracket is a lot lower. Other than Minnesota, everyone else around us is lower. And so it's part of just being competitive in the Midwest, and it's important to lower all those brackets. It's a good policy decision, and I'm glad that we put it in this budget, and I hope the governor recognizes the importance of that competitiveness and signs the tax cut.
Attorney General Josh Kaul was very vocal throughout this process, wanting more funding for the Office of School Safety. He didn't get that full funding request. Why did you make the decision you guys did there as far as funding that office?
Yeah, we just felt it was important to continue to support that office at the level that we created it. The Republican legislature created it in 2017. And so we want to maintain it at current funding. He has greatly expanded that office with federal money. And that's certainly his prerogative to use those federal grants and things in that way, and if he wants to continue that, he can. But we want to focus on maintaining the office as we created it, and if he wants to create it to other things, he can certainly consider the federal money for that.
He obviously pointed out that the tip line is the one thing that he won't be able to fund anymore. Did you not get compelling evidence that that was effective?
Yeah, I mean, the argument of a tip line that was created entirely with federal money and has always been funded with federal money, that somehow he can't continue that. I think it's just he needs to make his decisions. If he wants to use those funds elsewhere, that's his prerogative as the CEO of that agency. But I think that he created it that way and certainly can continue to fund it that way.
You talk about federal funding and trying to use state funding now. Similar conversation with the Child Care Counts program. They wanted, people within that program wanted you to keep matching some of those funding. Mm-hmm. Why not follow along with that? Why make the decision there?
Yeah, we just didn't want to create a whole new program that the governor created with the federal money. And we have programs in place to support child care already, and we invested in those, about $93 million, to focus on our shares program that helps families that need it the most, to put some money in to help grow capacity and make some grants available to providers to expand or maintain their facilities. And then we put a lot of money into the rewards program. We doubled it, and that is a program that supports the high quality teachers. We want to make sure that the best staff that we have in our child care systems here in Wisconsin are rewarded. And so we invested in those programs, and I think those are good, sound investments, and it's certainly a different approach than just a giant subsidy of what the governor wanted. But we're not interested in taking all of these programs that have been created with federal money and recreating them and growing them with the state government. That's just not a position that our caucus was interested in. We were clear on that really from the start. A lot of programs that the governor wanted to grow government with, and we just said that's not the path we're taking.
Have there been any overtures from the governor as to what he might do with this budget?
I don't think, certainly not any discussions with us. He's made some public comments. I mean, I think if you look at the fact that the number of bills that have been signed in the last couple of weeks, like shared revenue, the housing workforce bills, those are all things that are funded in this budget. We had a great shared revenue package, but the money that local governments need to provide the services that people expect, that's in this budget. So to support those things, to support the education funding that was part of the shared revenue deal, you need to sign this budget if you're the governor, and all the money's there, and it's going to be a real missed opportunity if he doesn't. So I think some of the support of those bipartisan legislation is a signal that this is a budget that the governor needs to support because the money's all there, and people throughout Wisconsin expect those programs to be funded.
All right, Representative Mark Bourne, thanks so much for the time here this week.
Thanks for having me.